How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to CyberClinic Central. My name is George, and today we have two special guests. My host, Mehdi, is back, and I have our special guest, Mike, on the podcast, our first special guest, actually. So first off the bat, Mehdi, welcome home.
Thank you.
How does it feel?
Yeah, no, I'm glad to be back. And I'm glad to do another one of these, and hopefully we can keep bringing in special guests.
Yeah. No, I'm super thankful for you, Mike. Thanks for coming on the CyberClinic Central podcast.
Of course, pleasure to be here.
First guest, you never forget your first, right? So,
Right.
glad to have you on. Mehdi, any updates since the last time you came on? It's been a couple episodes. Carlos was on the 2 episodes ago. We had Bianca, and now, as promised, he's back.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, as far as updates are concerned, everything is going pretty great with the clinic. People are doing really good work out there. But other than that, yeah, it's just been really busy. We're staying busy.
Yeah, keeping busy, I hear. And I want to take a second to actually congratulate you before you get in the podcast. You recently graduated with your master's in cybersecurity, so I just want to give you a little clap on podcast. And I know you're going for your doctorate now, so you want to talk a little PhD on that.
That's awesome.
You want to talk a little on that, what you're doing with that?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get a PhD in computer science with a focus on cybersecurity, mainly machine learning and AI and how that works with cyber.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's going to be some pretty exciting stuff. I might talk about it more sometime when I come back on the podcast, like the ideas that I have.
Yeah.
But none of it is super fleshed out right now. So
yeah, still early on.
Progress.
Yeah. I'm super excited to see what you do with, man. I've been with you every step of the journey, undergrad, graduate. I'm not getting dragged into the PhD. A PhD in CyberClinic Central. That's what I want. So that's what I want to do. And before we get into you, Mike, I want to just address our stage. Right, we've changed location. We've changed kind of viewing how you see the podcast a couple times. We're experimenting with different stuff. We're trying to see what works best for the podcast. Just trying to make the experience better, both audibly and visually, right? So that's my goal, to keep improving the podcast. And yeah. So without further ado, let's get into you, Mike. A lot of our members in the Cyber Clinic are young cybersecurity students, high school through graduate, freshmen. So they would love to hear like how you got into cyber, what kind of interested you at first, and what kind of steps you took throughout your career, and where that got you right now.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, George, Mehdi. Awesome. My background's in the DoD. Started out in the Air Force in 2003, like over 20 years ago.
Nice.
Before some students were probably born, maybe a
couple. I was 5 years old.
Yeah, but it's been a good ride.
I'm older than I look. So.
Started out in telecommunications, and then moved over to IT, and then had the chance to take on this cybersecurity program within our kind of IT project management office. It was kind of like a phone modem firewall. So when we had that opportunity to take that program over, I jumped at it because I knew I wanted to get into cybersecurity, and it proved true. So after getting experience with that, having some good results, was able to move over to the base cybersecurity office where they managed the network for about 28,000 users.
Okay. So networking was kind of your first step into cybersecurity.
Yeah, just telecommunications, networking, and then cybersecurity. So it was kind of awesome to have that building block experience because you know, in cybersecurity, you have to relate to the other functions, the other teams in the organization, and having those experiences of being in those different work centers was really helpful.
Yeah, that's something they echo with our studies now, that having that full depth of knowledge between every type of device in an enterprise is what makes you a good cybersecurity specialist. And it's actually very common that I hear a lot of the top guys in cybersecurity like yourself, they come from a networking background. It always seems like, oh yeah, I was doing networking in this, I was doing networking in that, and then in your story, you jumped on opportunity and you did it. But a lot of the other stories I've heard, they were just dragged into it. They're like, we need a guy, and you're the closest thing we got, so we're gonna take you. So that's awesome. Around what year were you jumped on opportunity?
So in the IT shop, that was 2014, and then I went to the other shop in 2016. So it's about 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is all in the Department of Defense still?
In the Department of Defense as an Air Force civilian. While at the same time, I was also a part-time military member, which I still am, in the Air National Guard.
Nice. Thank you for your service. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Of course.
So what are you doing now? Where did that lead you to where you currently are in your career?
So I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Things were going great as in the DoD. I still love it. But then in 2018, I took a job with Lockheed Martin here at Nellis Air Force Base, working on the F-35 program.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was
Wait, are you allowed to say that?
Oh yeah, everyone knows it exists. So as a cybersecurity lead there for 3 different classified programs related to the F-35, while at the same time I was just getting the ideas ready to do a cybersecurity business, which I got it registered in 2019.
Nice.
And then got a few clients and went full time in October 2020, right in the heart of COVID, which made it a little harder.
Right.
Because doing cybersecurity consulting, a big part of that is meeting people. That's the easiest way to get business. And there's really no conferences going on, so it's really had to try everything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a great experience.
And you've been doing that up till now, 2024, right?
Yeah, still doing it right now.
That's awesome. Consultancy is actually Mehdi was something Mehdi was looking to get into after his PhD. That's his goal.
That's literally the career field I want to get into. And honestly, if you look at the cyber clinic and the way I modeled the whole entire thing is basically like a consultancy company.
Oh, really? Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I guess you could say I did it because that's the field that I'm very passionate about. Now, there's a lot of people in the clinic who might be interested in consulting, and I think that they could definitely get a lot out of this podcast for sure, because I know I have questions, right, about consulting, which I'll get into eventually. But the whole entire inception of the clinic was, hey, can we get a volunteer student force to do consulting on a smaller scale for micro businesses to gain the skills, because interacting with people doesn't change.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like,
absolutely.
So the business owner is going to be a business owner, whether they're like their business is huge, or their business is small. It's still a person. You still got to deal with them. You still got to convince them to do certain practices. So it's one of those things, like, because I was in the military as well, as most of our audience probably will remember. In the military, we have this thing where, like, you zero your weapon, and
get it locked on target.
Yeah, to get it locked on target, right? Well, you could go to the range to fire at 300 meters, right?
Yep.
But you could also scale that way down and fire at a much smaller distance, right? To kind of adjust. And the way we used to do it is, like, we actually had like these bore lasers. So you would actually use the bore laser. You'd have a distance that's comparable that would do the same. The bullet trajectory would be the same at that long distance as the short distance, because bullets travel in an arc.
True.
So it's kind of like the whole mentality that I had when we developed the clinic was, hey, let's just do this like at that small distance, because if they can do it at the small distance, then they get zeroed in to be able to do it at that long distance, which is the professional side, which is what you're doing. So yeah.
Well, I think that's a really important approach, and I think a lot of businesses miss this point. Like, I'll reach out to some businesses, say, hey, you probably need some cybersecurity help. They'll say, no, we're good. We only have 1 or 2 people. And I tell them it's not about how many people you have. It's about the types of data you have. Exactly. Because say you're a tax prep company. Whether you have the tax return of 1 customer or 10,000, it doesn't really make much of a difference. You still have to protect it the same way.
Exactly.
So I think the approach at the cyber clinic is really valuable, and it's very similar to consulting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, the compliance side of the house, governance side of the house, all that stuff that kind of just goes along with all that. These are skills that you can say, if you could do it for, like a test case, which is essentially a micro business, you should be able to take those same skill sets and use them. Scale them up to a professional level. So again, when we talk about getting students experience, that's essentially where it's at.
Yeah. And I think you hit on something super important. A lot of our members are interested in consultancy, because we've gone to multiple conferences, Department of Energy, namely one of them, and a lot of the networking we do is a lot of different consultants. And every time I'm walking with Mehdi and we're walking with different one of our members, as soon as we talk to consultants, the ears perk, the eyes open. So kind of tell us a little bit more about that experience. I'm sure Mehdi will have some questions for you as well, because we love to hear about all the different consultancy stories, and love to pick up any tips and tricks for us too.
Yeah, it was definitely eye-opening to me. I had some friends that were saying, well, why'd you pick consulting? Consulting, you're probably not going to turn into like $1 billion business, because in consulting, to make more money, you have to do more work, right? It's generally an hour rate or project based. I did it So I thought it was important to get into those small and medium-sized businesses, meet with those business leaders and the technical leaders, see how they think, see what they really want rather than what I think they want. And honestly, it's been an eye-opening experience because with a government background, we don't sell anything in the government. We spend money. We're creative at spending money. You may have heard before. I think it's kind of public information.
Yes.
So it was definitely a steep learning curve that continues to this day. And the big lesson was to learn the benefit that the business leader is expecting from you. They don't want to hear about our features. They don't care too much about the tools that we use, what Wireshark, whatever. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear that their data's safe so they can do their business, they can make money.
Yeah, and this goes back to something that we talked about in the past, which is the two types of clients that we usually run into, right? The types of clients that we run into is you got your person who wants to be super involved, right? They're on top of you, trying to figure out exactly what you're doing. And then you got the person who say, hey, just get my stuff to work, and that's the day. And from what I'm hearing, but then again, okay, so from what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like it's these business leaders that you're dealing with are kind of like, hey, we don't really care about the process. Just get it to work, tell us what you're doing, and how much you want. Paid for it. But I would also argue that if that business that you're, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, by the way, if that business has like an IT department, right, or a cybersecurity department even, right, they're probably going to be the ones, they're going to exemplify the other type of client that we deal with who stays on top of you, like, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Is that correct? Is that a fair assessment?
I have kind of like multiple approaches. So different clients need different levels of hands-on. So when we generally start with a risk assessment,
right?
And we'll say we need to see these things, and you could either have your IT person go in and get us those things if they exist, or I can sit down with the IT person and we can walk through it together. Or if you don't, or if they're too busy, or maybe you don't have one, then I can do it. So we just need to know what works best for you on a given project. There's other consultants that might be more rigid, and they'll say, well, if you don't have someone that can just upload it for us, maybe you're not a great client for us, perhaps. So there are different sizes, different approaches to that.
Right, indeed. So one of my questions to you, right, is, and this is probably for our membership, for our membership's benefit. If you can define risk, how would you define risk to a small, medium, large business?
Risk, well, there's different tolerances of risk. You have to have a risk tolerance, whether you're based on your business factors. So how much volatility can you expect, I would say, generally. It's kind of like in the NBA, for example, you want to take the 2-point shot and have a higher chance of making it, but get less points, or you want to go for the 3-pointers. So we just work with different clients to figure out what's their goal for their cybersecurity program, help them define risk for them, and just design everything based on that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So for the members, again, one of the things that they struggle with as brand new to this field, right, is they don't know how to differentiate between like vulnerability, risk, threats, and how they interact with each other, right? So the thing that we learned essentially is, hey, you're absolutely right about the risk tolerances for the client. And the thing is that how do you let a micro business know, or even a small business know, or how do you convince them about risk? Like, hey, this is risk, right? Because they might disagree and say, nah, we don't think it's a risk. And you are essentially dealing with, like, you're the subject matter expert on this particular cybersecurity concept, and you have to kind of deliver that message, right? And I dare say that that's the crux of the whole entire matter.
Yeah, that's generally the starting point. Is how much risk can you tolerate? Another starting point, like we talked about, what type of data do you have? That drives some of it from a regulatory compliance standpoint. But because if they have very low risk tolerance, then you have to really protect that data tighter, but I don't try to get too analytical and throw like these robust formulas at them. I'll say, like, for example, what would happen if your systems were down for a day? What would happen if they were down for a week? How much money would you expect to lose in a day? or in a week. Can you accept that? Because if you can't accept that, then we have to, do this set of security controls rather than the lower level tier of security controls.
Right. Yeah. Well, my whole point was what if the client does not agree, if you will, with your particular risk? Like, so you're saying because of this, right? So you have something that you're protecting some data, and you're being silly somehow by I don't know, like introducing vulnerabilities into your system by and again, I'm talking from the perspective of like a micro business, right?
Oh yeah.
You're allowing your grandchild to install
Roblox on the work computer.
It
happens.
And you go up to that micro business owner and you're trying to tell them like, hey, this is risky, and of course you can't really approach it by telling them like, this is risky because we said so.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of have to deliver that picture.
Right.
And tell them why, explain, like say what could potentially happen, who the threat actors are that would do something to you, what the vulnerability is. And that dance, I think is
true.
Is essentially, in my opinion, the crux of the whole entire consulting world.
Right. That's where a good consultant earns their value compared to anyone who calls himself a consultant. You have to know how to do it right. You have to express it in the proper terms. Show them the impacts of doing different things.
Yeah.
And you'll also keep in mind that it's not risk avoidance. That's why they call it risk management.
Exactly.
And you'd be surprised how many people would like to try to get it to risk avoidance and say, oh, well, your scan shows 20 vulnerabilities. Well, get it to 0. And it's like, well, we can't unless you get rid of that software that you use every day. You want to do that?
Unless you start processing everything on paper and pencil.
We actually did have a client at one point that we made recommendations to, and they were like, I just can't do that. And I think you can see it in their face, like they feel bad because almost like they feel like they're letting you down because they cannot comply or do every single recommendation. Like, again, I'm speaking from the micro business perspective. Like these are like mom and pop shop type situations. They get a lot more personal than like a big corporation would, right? So they see you every day. You're going out there to help them, and
it's a relationship.
Yeah, you start building a relationship, and then you make the recommendations, and they look at you like, "But I really can't do that recommendation. Like it's just not going to work for my business. Like it's going to drop my business or do something harmful to the business."
Exactly.
And then I have to basically jump in and say, no, let's put controls in place.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't worry about it. Let's put the controls in place. We'll just get it as small as possible.
Yeah.
Like the risk, just manage it.
Exactly.
So
compensating controls.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. And I'm so happy, by the way, that you said that you have to say it right. You have to approach it, and that's what makes you like a good consultant. And I'm glad that's for the membership because when they write these reports, they interact with these clients, and we kind of give them a hard time sometimes about the way that they write their reports. And
but the delivery matters.
But the
delivery is so important when it comes to consultancy. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like any communication. The communication is effective if it's effective for the recipient.
Yeah.
If you say it the way you want to hear it, or the way you want to hear yourself, it's not going to work out that great, So, but that's the value of having both a technical and a business background. So that's what's kind of nice in the Free Cyber Clinic, that there's a good amount of technical students and some business students in there, and maybe some students that do both. I know my undergraduate's business, my master's is information systems, and that works really well because ultimately the technical capabilities of the business are there to ultimately support the business. And then, you want to have good business processes that get the most out of your technical capabilities.
Indeed.
So
very well put, very well said.
And you beat me to a question there because later on I was going to ask what your educational background was looking like, but you hit the answer, you read my mind in advance. But I think you hit on something super important with consultancy that would also be super beneficial to our membership, is that from what I understand, every client you're with, it's a unique experience. There's no one size fits all solution. You can't just buy one cybersecurity solution and it fix every business. And I think that's something that gets often misconstrued in cybersecurity, because cybersecurity, a lot of people see as like a technical field, right? And technical field is like, okay, the solution is clearly laid out. Things are clearly step by step, brick by brick, solution by solution. But cybersecurity is not like, hey, there's a one size serving, right? And I think that's something we struggle with. Our members struggle understanding at first because, why can't it's all small businesses? They're all they're all this type of business, they're all that type of business, but each experience, each client, each systems is different, right?
I mean, you can almost say,
Absolutely.
I mean, this might be something crazy to say, but you can almost say that it's a symptom of being an engineer.
Yeah.
Right? So you're like, hey, there's got to be some sort of path to follow through here that's like analytical, mathematical, like with a serious, like, hey, this is a formula.
A logical path down, yeah.
But what we do with consultancy, no, it's more an art than it is a science. And the fact that you're going into a place that you've never been to, right? You have no idea what they got in their closets. And I say that because sometimes they can have hardware in their closet that hasn't been decommissioned, right?
More skeletons.
You don't know the culture. You do not know the leadership. You do not know the stakeholders. You don't know who wants you there. You don't know who doesn't want you there. You don't know who thinks you're a waste of money. You don't know.
Right. Which can happen.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
you don't know who's hostile because they think you're about to just do a scorched earth thing on their whole entire network, right? So it's finesse. Like you have to go in there and be I guess you could say graceful, and you have to figure out the situation dynamically.
Yeah.
And this is why in the cyber clinic we could use checklists, but I tell them do not use checklists because you're not learning how to exist within a dynamic space if you're using checklists. So you should not fall back on that. You should try to learn because it takes time. This is like a learned skill, right?
Yeah, because the thing is with the checklist, if you have a checklist, that's all you're checking for.
Yep.
You're gonna check your checklist, and that's it. That's your box.
Right.
And with consultancy, you have to look at the whole surrounding.
Right, and of course, like you use frameworks as well. So like we have the framework, the modified NIST framework is that's your checklist.
Cybersecurity framework?
Essentially, the NIST cybersecurity framework. We modified it for the small and micro business because some things you can't do, like make a sock or whatever. We modified it, and we're like, hey, now this is your essentially like your not a checklist, but it's like your boundaries by which to move around. But you're not going to get like a pilot checklist, like all right, engine's good, wings good, windows are fine. You're not going to get that because that, even though we could probably make something like that, because you generally find the same stuff in small businesses, right, or micro businesses, the same problems seem to crop up constantly, right?
Trends, there's definitely trends.
Yeah, so we definitely could, but then we're robbing the students from the opportunity to learn how to exist and operate in a dynamic environment that is like a skill that you need if you want to be a consultant.
Absolutely. So what I do is I have a tool set based on past projects, past clients. And that's the value, that's the benefit in consulting. The more you do it, the better you get at it, the faster you get at it, because what one client needs, their industry peers probably need as well. Right? So, but this is why it's so important to put a lot of effort into your scoping process. Know how to define the work to be done. Know how to define kind of where they at now. Like you're not going to know the full scale of their what they have because you didn't go in their systems yet. You're asking questions like something as simple as who does your cybersecurity? Do you have anyone full time that does it? Oh, your IT person does it. How much of their job would you say it is? And then that person might say, well, I'm really swamped, so I do it when I can. And then you go in your mind, you're like, okay, this seems like a pretty newer program, kind of raw. And then you just know that you're going to have to, do these set of things rather than this. And also you have to take into account like where their systems are. Are they in the cloud? Are they on premise? Are they hybrid?
No, that's a very good point. And you're right. Like you're kind of, by doing questions, you're assessing the maturity. Yeah. You're assessing like, okay, what kind of environment am I walking into, which is absolutely great. Again, maybe we should actually start doing something along those lines because even though, so the reason why we don't do it is because like maybe have like a pre-assessment talk. So we have a survey that we do with the clients where they just kind of answer some questions. But I think it could be a great thing to have where the students are engaging with the client prior to even visiting to kind of start solidifying scope what they're going to be responsible for. And the reason why we haven't really been doing that or why we didn't feel like there's a need for that is because, again, it's so small, right? Yeah. It's a micro business, probably just like one computer. And, like you can get that done within like 30 minutes of
Right.
getting into the door with the small business owner, into the small business. However, we want to practice exactly how we fight in everything that we do. So, yeah, I'm going to keep that in mind.
I thought, well, let me put on the website what ended up being like an 18-question
Sure.
kind of scoping process, a little survey.
Yeah.
Like when you give me all this information, I'll know exactly what you need. But what I found was people were dropping off.
Oh, wow.
Because people either didn't want to ask all the questions, they didn't want to give you their information yet because they don't really know who you are.
Yeah.
Or maybe they feel like they're not capable of giving it to you effectively, so they don't like it. So what I do now is I literally just say, like, what's your name, your company, your phone number, your email, and then any details you want to tell me. And the biggest project I've ever had was from a company owner, and he said, please call me, I want to discuss cybersecurity.
Oh.
And now I get a lot less drop-offs, people like about to go through the process and stopping.
Yeah.
Because they're like, it's so easy. It takes like 1 minute, and then before you know it, you're on the phone call. Because in consulting, whether you know it or not, most consultants have to sell a little bit.
Yeah.
And in sales, you don't want to focus on selling and closing a deal. The first thing you want to try to sell is a phone call. Like just interacting with a real human, because once that happens, you're a lot closer to just getting the deal and doing the work.
Wow, that's fantastic advice. I think our membership will really
Good.
appreciate this. Yeah, that's amazing advice. I agree 100%. And
I agree 100% too. Because I believe the more interactions we get with the business owner, the better that whole interaction from A to Z, from the minute they say, hey, I want to get our cybersecurity checked out, to the end where we're fixing all the issues, right? I think for me, that's one of my most important things in the clinic. That's what my project is, making sure that A to Z client transition is
great.
crystal, because I used to work in sales. So
Oh, really?
I know a lot about the this interaction, how it goes. And
Come on, George, why didn't you tell us?
Right? Withholding information.
Little background on my sales. Yeah. So when I was an undergrad, I worked at Cox Cable.
Okay.
It's a technical field.
So I was selling internet, cable TV, and phone. And I'm sure as many of the viewers know, and you guys know, that's not the most happiest environment. No one's ever really happy with.
If they
cable
call
company.
you, yeah.
So a lot of my interactions would often handle from taking upset customers, making them neutral or okay, and then trying to help them out with their service and getting a sale from that, or starting off new and then trying to change their perception of cable companies, because that was the big challenge for us. Is like, people are walking into a cable company thinking they're gonna get scammed, and it's as a salesperson, it's your job to kind of like overcome that perception. Like, hey, no, we're trying to help you out here, which we generally were.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, there were some companies out there and representatives out there that weren't as good, but at our store we were. So
Yeah.
And I think that applies to cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is a difficult topic for some business owners to approach.
Well, we've had
Oh, yeah,
clients
absolutely.
that, well, you can't really call it consultants, but we had clients that had interactions with cybersecurity professionals, just let's call it, right? And they ended up just paying a lot of money and for basically nothing. And then we have a lot of them, like, you could say to them, like, well, why did this come about? Like, why did this happen to me? Easy.
An incident?
Well, no, like, why did
The way the project went.
when they contacted cybersecurity professionals, they basically just got taken advantage of, because a lot of these companies, and I'm not going to name any names, unlike you, but a lot of these companies,
We can cut it.
they want to find a like a size fits all solution for automation, because as we discussed in consultant, there's no such thing. But obviously businesses are trying to make money.
Yeah.
So they're going to try their best to find you a solution that is one size fits all.
Yeah.
They can push to everybody and anybody who comes to them, and whether it works or doesn't work, it is what it is, right? You want something bespoke, you want something a little bit more custom, well, you better be ready to pay some serious money, right? So
yeah, I mean, generally.
yeah, so I tell these clients, like, that we run into that ended up paying for a lot of money, like, hey, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but at the end of the day, there's like really nothing for us that we could do to like try to get a refund if you can, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I think there's always something you can do. Like, say you have a scoping call or something, and it turns out what the client needs based on what you think at that point if they couldn't handle anything at all, you could say, well, what do you want to do? And then you can say, they might say like, well, whatever you can get done in one day. And then you'll say, well, let's focus on these 5 things. And then if we get done with those 5, we'll get to these 3 things.
Right.
And there's always some way to make an impact in the field.
No. What I meant by that was there's nothing we can do to recoup their losses.
Oh, right. Oh, of course.
So
yeah.
for the stuff that they spent,
Yeah.
money they
Yeah.
spent. No, of course
It's
we can help
unfortunate.
them out, and usually we do
Oh,
at
yeah.
least
Yeah.
get them to a state, because again, I am a firm believer that 90% of cybersecurity is just common sense stuff. Like if you want to get to 100%, that's when you're spending a lot of money. But if you're at, like, you can get to 90% by just doing common sense, smart, hygienic things online.
Yeah.
Multi-factor authentication is not very expensive, and it will get you far.
Yeah.
Having good antivirus, making sure you don't click on phishing emails, like that type of stuff. That is, I mean, you're getting there. You're getting very secure. Like, there's only so many doors, but once you start getting to situations where, hey, no, I want to be as close to 100% untouchable, then you start talking about money. But yeah, so my whole thing is this: if somebody wanted to like get into consulting, right? Which, like me, I do. Like, what do you think, in your opinion, professional opinion in this case, would be like the most valuable technical skills, and what would be the most valuable soft skills for them to have?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. If I had to choose between someone that was like a 9 technically and a 5 communication, or vice versa, I would take the other way. Someone that's like a 9 in communicating and a 5 in technical, because you can always build them up a little at a time. Whereas if someone's a really poor communicator, that's a lot harder to build up, because that's just not who some people are, and that's fine. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Just willing to do different work every day, because some people really like a process, and those people might be better suited for a SOC. They might think in their mind, oh, well, no, I want to do consulting. Well, no, the things you actually like doing aren't consulting. It's like, you seem like you want to be like sitting in a computer going through audit logs all day, every day. So keep that in mind.
Like for example, a lot of consultants in other fields, I'm not so sure about cybersecurity, but I know a lot of consultants in other fields have to do a lot of traveling, right? So, like personally, I love traveling. So I'm like, yeah, that's completely fine with me. But you're absolutely right. You're not going to be sitting behind a desk all day as a consultant. You have to go out and press the flesh and like talk to your clients, build relationships, do all that good stuff. And I also agree 100%, and I hope the membership is listening again. Yes, communication is absolutely, I agree that it's very, very, very crucial if you want to get into this line of work.
Yeah, the thing in consulting to remember is Alan Weiss, he's one of the world's best known business consultants. I read a few of his books. One of them is called The Consulting Bible. He says, as a reminder, a consultant is meant to be a new brain, not another pair of hands. If you need another pair of hands, if you have a worker shortage, go hire someone. That's not a consultant. A consultant is someone that's supposed to come in, meet with the decision makers, not the worker bee. Meet with the decision makers, because before anything can happen, you need to know that change is going to happen. You're working with the person that can say yes and make it happen, because you might think you are, but you're often not. So it is worth taking the time just to make sure you're talking to the right person.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. You're absolutely right about that too. If we were to go to a small business or a micro business, if we're not talking to the business owner, which I don't think at this point we've ever have not talked to the owner, then it would be nightmarish to try to get any of our recommendations through.
If you could touch more on like the importance of like being able to communicate at different levels, right? Because I feel like in consultancy, you have to be able to communicate high and low, meaning like you got to communicate technical and you got to communicate, business, right? So are there any by role you could obviously tell who you're talking to, right? But some technical leaders might be more business savvy than you think, right? So like, what are kind of tips that you have for like communicating, like when you're talking to that C-suite, you're talking to that business owner, like when you're communicating stuff that they may not understand, or B, they may not care about?
Yeah, so someone in that company requested you in one way or another. Maybe you met them somewhere. In some way, they're the one that initially said, "I want you to work with us." So you get them on your side. You get them to be the one to go and convince the senior, like the top boss, for example, of what's going on. You can go together, maybe, but you need someone on the inside advocating for you. And then it's also good to ask them how the other people are. How are the decision makers? What's their preferences? Do they take a while to make a decision? Things like that. Do they like elaborate briefings, or do they want just like a 2 or 3 slide briefing? Because it varies a lot. And that's how you get that information. Just ask one person how the other people are, and they'll almost always tell you. Once in a while, you'll see that it just doesn't prove to be right, because maybe like the CEO is really nice to his employees, but maybe doesn't understand why there's cybersecurity consultants there, and he's just not nice to you that day. But you can still get stuff done and just show your value. So just know the communication style of that recipient before you can. You know, if you're going to have a phone call, just think, okay, well, I met with their technical lead yesterday. Today is with their senior vice president. He's a business person. He's probably going to care about these things. And then after a while, the more you do it, the more often you're going to be right about those things. And just have those answers ready.
Cool.
Yeah, pretty good.
Do you have anything else?
Yeah, well, I was going to, so one of our first podcasts that we had, I mentioned like the people who do, not necessarily consulting, but like just managed service providers in general, right? Like why they don't do micro businesses and like lower the price to, you know, address, or like it's basically to try to include the micro businesses as well for protection. And I use an analogy about a haircut, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to get your opinion on that because you know, I wanted to push the point home that they're not being evil companies. Like the managed service providers are not trying to be evil. Like, no, we don't care. We want just money. Give us money. The micro businesses don't matter. I don't think that's really the picture, right? It's just the overhead is so large that they have to pursue and deal with companies who actually can pay them their rates that they're charging. Like, what is your opinion on all that?
I think the easiest way to explain it is the 80-20 rule. If you're familiar with that, it's when whatever you're doing, you're getting like 80% of the results out of 20% of the pie, for example. And that happens in a lot more situations. And I think that kind of answers that question, because those MSPs, they want to focus on the bigger companies, because if the companies are too small, then they might need 20 of really small businesses to get them the contract size of the one bigger one, right? And those smaller contracts, they still need maintenance anyway, right? They still need things like audits to happen, patching, vulnerability scanning. So if they're gonna, they often figure that if they're gonna do like a pen test, might as well do it on a big system that where they can charge 5 or 10 times as much.
Exactly.
It's just business. It almost always comes just down to business, really.
It makes money and sense. I mean, if they have to do, say, 100 small businesses, they have to do auditing on 100 small businesses, and they're getting paid a lot less, and then they could do one and get paid. So because this stuff costs money.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, like you have to hire people, you have to get equipment, you have to get this, that, and the other, licensing.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to get your input on that, because I very firmly believe that these managed service providers and other cybersecurity professionals are not like just, you know, rubbing their hands like ha ha ha. You know, we leave the small businesses, we leave them out in the cold, we don't care. You know, and like the only reason that the cyber clinic can do what it does is because it is volunteer based.
Right.
Oh yeah.
You know, so
that's true.
Yeah. So
I've been kind of thinking along the same lines, right? Like I also understand like the MSPs, that the bigger customers can pay you more. Great. But I also do a lot of outreach to the very small businesses. Like I'll see the business and I'll look at the employee number, like on LinkedIn, and I'll say, oh, 5 employees. I'll still reach out to them because I like working with them and building products that I can reuse, and I can keep learning what they want and find ways to help the smaller businesses easier, right? Like if it's just as time consuming as the bigger business, it's not worth it. So that's what I'm working on, is just to get better, quicker, and help those businesses. And the other way that those businesses can benefit is just good software. There's some good software tools out there for different purposes related to cybersecurity.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's actually, you can say that's one of our weaknesses at the clinic, is that we have to be software agnostic, right? So it's like, hey, you need a VPN or.
Oh yeah, no, that makes sense.
And they say, oh, which one? And you're like, I can't tell you that.
Yeah, just need a VPN.
Yeah.
Well, what you could do, there's a lot of Gartner studies. You familiar with Gartner?
Yes.
The research, and they'll put together like a top 10 list or
Yeah.
something like that. Like for a while, I was researching software to do risk assessments quicker. And I found one of theirs for free, and it was awesome. It was like 20, 30 pages. It compared like them in every category, and then you just pick one. So if you can't make that brand decision, maybe just have those reference papers in mind that you could say, well, here's a Gartner link. There they talk about it. You can read the pros and cons. If you have any questions, maybe I can help you with that, and leave it at that. And then you stay vendor agnostic.
Absolutely. That is another great piece of advice.
I know. We're telling this for the membership, but honestly, I'm going to go back and re-listen to this episode and just take notes.
Well, again, like this content is mainly for our members and anybody interested in the clinic just in general. So like that's really, really good advice for us to follow.
Yeah, that's awesome. So kind of piggybacking on that, since a lot of this episode is for our members and stuff, a lot of tips on consulting. What advice would you give to a freshman trying to get into cybersecurity and consultancy? Is there any specific, maybe like classes they should take, certifications, internships that they should pursue? Is there certain things that they should look for, something that they should go for, something they should not?
I think it's kind of the same answer for cybersecurity in general. There's a lot of different ways to approach it. There's big consulting companies, there's small, there's kind of medium-sized, or maybe you might want to start your own. Just, I would say, do some research, maybe read a book or two, like kind of the one I mentioned, the Consulting Bible. Maybe not exactly that one, because that's a little higher level consulting, because that guy's like one of the best in the world, which I'm nowhere near that. But there's some good books out there for beginning consultants, and then if you just read it, hear the things they talk about, and you'll know if you really like it or you don't, because there often is a selling angle to it. A lot of technical people don't love that. I still don't love it. I've learned to embrace it because I try to embrace my biggest fears. Like I've done that in the past with public speaking. Did that with running years back. I was a terrible runner, and I knew I had to get better at running quick for officer training school. So I just did that. So just figure out exactly if you like it, and then if you do, then pursue internships and just reach out to people. UNLV has the advantage of having the cybersecurity board, which is how I got introduced to it through Nine, who you both know.
Yeah.
And it's been fantastic. We all get to mentor generally like 3 to 5 students, meet with them, whether it's a week, every 2 weeks, every month, whatever the student needs.
Yeah.
And then if a student wants to do consulting, just say, I'd like a mentor that is in consulting.
Right. Yeah, and that's actually quite, because I also, Nine was actually my mentor when I was going through, and, you definitely need to be with a mentor who kind of has that wavelength, like, hey, this is essentially what I'm trying to get at here is that if you're interested in getting into consulting or anything actually in cyber, whether it be, I don't know, pen testing, whether it be forensics, find a mentor, find a mentor who is doing that. And then that way you learn from them immediately if that is something you actually want to pursue. Because they can just tell you, like, this is my life. This is my day-to-day life. Do you want to emulate or no?
That's true. And here's one that I think will be useful. So I've seen a lot of people reach out to often the top most successful people, right? Like people with like hundreds of thousands of followers and say, hey, why don't you mentor me? And a lot of people do that. So the answer is often no. Right. So what you could do, instead of asking someone to mentor you, just start asking questions. Because people will answer you quicker because they do want to help, but a mentor-mentee relationship can be considered time-consuming.
It's a commitment.
It's a bigger commitment.
Yeah.
So just start asking, and before you know it, you're kind of getting that mentoring anyway. Like if you get to the point where
it's a cheat code,
it's kind of a cheat code, and that's what I would say. Like if you want to do consulting or anything in cybersecurity, go on LinkedIn, do some messaging, go on the message boards, just reply to people's comments or just DM them and just say something very low pressure, something that there's no reason to say no to. Like, what made you know you want to get into consulting? And then before you know it, a conversation starting. It's when you start out with it's just like in selling. If you
Yeah.
start with the big question, like, do you want to buy this today? It's not going to happen.
Right.
But if you just act normal and just have a conversation, get to know them, be likable.
Practice your selling skills by trying to soft sell mentors.
Find yourself a mentor. It's sell yourself, right? Find a mentor.
It's actually really good advice. I mean, LinkedIn is a great site, and I'm sure people can probably really make use of it. But the clinic, again, we have our professional development team in there, and maybe they should be pushing this LinkedIn stuff too. Like maybe we should be more involved in the message boards,
Finding
helping
mentors,
people ask questions, and just kind of getting out there.
That's definitely some great advice. And then, of course, the question all cybersecurity pods are going to ask: certifications. Anything you recommend specifically?
For many years now, it's kind of been like if you have maybe 4 years or less, generally go for Security Plus. If you want to be more hands-on keyboard, CEH is good. Once you get a little more senior, CISSP is kind of the obvious answer. But I see a lot of value also in just cloud-based certs.
Okay.
AWS security. Those are really good because with certifications you have niche ones and then you have the broad ones. There's kind of benefits to both. Yeah. What I would say is map out why you're getting the certifications based on your path. So you figure out where in cybersecurity you want to go, whether it's in 1, 3, 5, 10 years, and then see what certifications you need, right? Because sometimes you might think something sounds good, then you realize it's not really helping your path, right? You don't want to necessarily pile up certs just for the sake of having them or having redundant certs, because sometimes you'll see people, they have like 15 certs on their name, and I kind of laugh a little bit because I'm like, well, I see you have that cert, so I knew that you're capable of getting those certs. The example I give is in the gym. If someone can lift 500 pounds, I'm like, got it. I bet you can lift 300 pounds, right?
Yeah.
So just be cognizant, do your research of what you want, because not only does it take some effort to study, a lot of certifications have the continuing education requirement.
Yeah.
And it gets to be a lot, right? So like right now I have 3 certifications that have continuing education requirements and a couple that don't. And the 3s already feels like a good amount of work to me. It's something that's on my calendar every year, to put in those hours, and you don't want to get too much, and then it just takes over your time. Right?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Cool. I think we got a lot of value information out of you today, Mike.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Cool. Any final thoughts for our membership that you give them?
Just really focus on the path that you want, and just take the steps to map it out. Like we talked about, and don't be afraid to communicate, right? Because if you don't ask, if you don't speak up, that's a no. That's so you have there's no downside to asking someone something. If I can be a help to you guys, whether in person, at the university, or a phone call, or you want to talk consulting or whatever it is, feel free to reach out anytime.
Oh, I'm bothering you all the time.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
awesome.
Bank on that.
That's awesome.
I will be on campus on Friday for that panel. There's, I think, something like 85 Clark County technical students coming to UNLV, and they're going to be going on tour throughout the day. And then I think it's somewhere around lunchtime. There's like 4 or 5 of us from the cybersecurity advisory board for the university on a panel to just talk tech as well, if anyone's interested.
Of course.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely keep in touch. We'll share your information with the clinic if that's all right with you, so they can have a mentor. Because me and Mehdi, I've met a lot of great mentors through Mehdi, 9 one of them, and now through 9U. So it's awesome to meet the different people in the industry.
You guys are doing amazing stuff. I've made posts on LinkedIn saying like, this is just like a model for universities to do, right? Like, you can learn something, but when you really learn, when you take it to that next level, it's when you're doing it. And the way you guys do it at the Free Cyber Clinic, it's like the best example of doing it that I've seen. So
like
thank you guys for doing it and leading it.
Thank you. Any closing remarks, Mehdi? You're fine.
Honestly, as I said, I am extremely appreciative to have the opportunity to speak with you, and I'm hoping that you can come visit us actually during maybe some of our meetings and meet the membership face to face. And yeah, I'm going to be bothering you quite a lot because this is kind of what I'm trying to get into. This is like literally the job that I feel happiest doing.
Good.
So
that's awesome. Let's do it.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thanks for tuning in to Cyber Clinic Central, guys. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.